Hello everyone, I'm majicDave and this is Sapiens. So it's been a few weeks since the last video and I haven't done a huge amount for the amount of time that's passed, although I have got quite a few little things done and I'm now back to work again after the sort of Christmas break, so I thought it was time to make another video. So as you can see, there's a few sort of random people who don't have markers. So these are Sapiens that don't belong to my tribe. They're sort of wandering through. So that's a new thing that I've just started working on, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But I've also done quite a few little graphical tweaks and UI sort of improvements and things too. So I'll go over some of those. So before I go into it, I thought I might just mention Noteheads. So I made this website called, it's at noteheads.net, and it's a music sequencing and notation website. It's all free, you can go in there and make music and play around with it. The reason I did this was because it's sort of like my equivalent of a game jam. So it's just me being able to kind of go and do something completely different, get out of my comfort zone, and just spend a couple of weeks just creating something using completely different tools and stuff. And I think that kind of thing is so valuable. It's a really good way to learn more about your own kind of your own abilities and learn more about the world outside of what you're used to. So I think that went really well. The website's probably not going to be all that successful, but it was a fun project and I certainly learned a lot. So now back to Sapiens, and one thing you might have noticed if you were paying close attention is that there are now dark areas in sort of the corners and things. It's a little bit hard to see during daylight, but there are actually shadows around the Sapiens as well. You can just see it there. If I just make it, let's make it sunset, then you can see the shadows a lot clearer, and certainly if it's sort of cloudy or you're indoors, then you can see them. So this is screen space ambient occlusion, and it's a common technique that is used in a lot of games. And if I'd been using Unity or something, it probably would have been a checkbox basically to turn this on, but I had to implement it myself, and that was quite an interesting process. And with everything like this, it's like, yeah, it's only a checkbox in Unity, but because I actually had to implement it, I totally understand how it all works, and I'm able to really tweak it to get the best performance out of it that I want for the technique that I want. And I was able to do some interesting things like sort of have the shadows grow larger in the distance, so you can sort of see the trees actually have a little bit of shadowing underneath them, and as you get closer, the shadows kind of get more and more detailed and refined. And I don't know what if Unity's implementation has those kind of things, but it's just, yeah, it's nice being able to have full control. This is one of the reasons why I like to make my own engine. Is it might take a little bit longer to get things done, but it's a lot easier then to tweak things and get things looking exactly how I want. So yeah. So I figured out how to implement SSAO using this tutorial at learnopengl.com, advanced lighting SSAO. So basically I just googled SSAO tutorial, and this was the first thing that showed up. I'm using Vulkan, but it doesn't matter. Everything's basically the same. I really wanted to know what the general technique was, and this tutorial covered it really nicely. And so I ended up then having to sort of I implemented it fairly differently in the end, but it was a nice explanation. So basically it's just sort of samples the depth buffer to try to find out where things are sort of getting crowded out by other stuff that's sort of just in front of it, and does a bunch of samples around to create sort of an image like this, and then you'd have to sort of blur it and do a few things like that. So it probably took me 2 or 3 days to get through all of this and get the end result. And you can see I've got in this debug display here, you can see what that ultimately kind of looks like. That's just, it creates this kind of image of all these sort of shadows, and then that's combined with the final output to create sort of a nice sort of soft shadowed look around everything, and it just helps to kind of ground everything in the scene, and just makes everything look a bit nicer. So I added a few options for that. You need to be able to turn that off. It is really, really fast. As you can see, it's quite blurry and a little bit sort of noisy and stuff. It's really designed to be able to run on quite low-end hardware and not have too much of a performance impact. And I may add options to, increase the detail of the ambient occlusion later, but I think it's actually kind of fine. I don't think there's too much of a problem with it as it is, so we'll see. But yeah, you can turn it off in here, and that'll save you some performance. If you don't like the effect, then you can just turn it off. So that's ambient occlusion. You might have also noticed that the snow in the distance is now much smoother, the transition. There used to be very sharp edges between the snow and also where the dirt is, and now there's this sort of jagged edge as well as smoother. That line is not as sharp as it was. So what is happening there is that before those edges are not actually at triangle boundaries, they're done by a shader. So if I go into the dig menu, then you can actually see where the triangles are, and you can see that the transitions between where that dirt turns to grass is actually not on the edge of a triangle. So that line there is shared by a couple of different triangles, and it's all done by a shader. So if I was doing triangle edges instead of hexagons, then everything would be relatively straightforward. But because I decided to get all clever and use per vertex materials, we have a few little kind of complications. So what I decided to do was actually use mip mapping and textures to solve that problem. So I could have done sort of shader side multi-sampling, but that's very, very expensive, and I didn't want to do that. I forget the name for it, sorry, but it's you basically you run the shader multiple times per pixel instead of using full screen anti-aliasing. So that was not really an option, and in the end I'm really happy with this. It gives me full control over sort of what this looks like on the edge, and also gives me that nice smooth transition in the mountains and stuff. So I just thought I'd show you how that kind of works, and what this texture looks like. So these are 4 different variants. They're applied sort of semi-randomly per triangle, and then the 3 colors, the 3 sort of color channels that you have, red, green, and blue, represent the different materials for each vertex. So if you think of a triangle sort of overlaid onto here, then you've got if this vertex is dirt, then all of the red stuff will be dirt, and if this is grass, then all the blue stuff will be grass, and so on, and then it will just interpolate based on the color. So you could have a fade between green and blue and have it all fade really smoothly over that change, but that would probably look quite terrible without more detailed textures and stuff, and that's not the route that I wanted to go. So yeah, I'm quite happy with this sort of jagged edge that I've got. I did try a kind of grassy sort of texture as well, but I didn't like how that looked. So anyway, I just thought you might be interested to see. You can see the sort of shapes that ends up with around these boundaries between materials. So a couple of other little things. When you click on an apple tree now, or any kind of item, you'll see that it's actually got a highlight. So that is something new. If I click on this guy, he's got a highlight as well. And the idea, the whole problem that I'm trying to solve here is this multi-select thing. And this is temporary. I don't like where this is and exactly how this works. But certainly you'd be able to use a scroll wheel to influence this and select more than one item. And really the problem is when you've got a forest or an orchard like this, and you want to gather all the apples, you don't want to have to click on each individual one and queue up apple gathering. And likewise, with not having a cursor, you can't just box select or anything like that, because it's really awkward. You don't want to have that kind of interface. So I've been trying to solve this for some time, and I think that something along these lines is going to work. I'm still thinking about it. I will probably implement this a bit better and see how it goes for a while first before going much further. But I think possibly I'm going to end up with maybe a little top-down map view where you can box select on that or something. So some kind of representation from above of all the things around it. I don't know yet, but I think it's heading in the right direction. I like the look of the selection, and I think that overall it's gonna work. But yeah, I just sort of started thinking about that. And I guess there's one more thing. I started thinking about weather. So I've got this little slider here that's just in the debug menu that allows me to make it cloudy. The cloud will sort of change color over time. So we've got kind of this sunset kind of shade. The smoke is not being lit by the cloud yet. We'll have to sort that out. But so actually let me make it midday, full cloud. Yeah, so it's really, there are no clouds yet. It's just me trying to figure out what was going to happen to the shadows, what was going to happen to sort of get a bit of a fog effect. This is like there's quite relatively heavy rain, and so you're sort of seeing the rain fade in between you and the sort of distant mountains, and just getting a real sort of feel for how the weather's going to feel when it's cloudy. And I'm actually really happy with it. I think that it's a nice look. It does have a gradient, so you can have sort of partly cloudy feel to it, and there's sort of softer shadows, and you can still see the sun sort of through this cloud. And there's a lot of potential to go completely mad with this and spend a lot of time making volumetric clouds and all sorts of stuff, but I don't think that's necessary for this game, and I don't want to spend months and months on that, because there's other places that it's probably better to kind of spend my time than messing around with clouds forever. So we'll see how far I go with that, but at least now, if you imagine a few sort of rain particles now, and maybe some lightning and thunder and stuff, you're not far off having some decent kind of weather, and even just transitioning through these levels of sort of overall cloud will make a big difference. As well as I think I can have some kind of particle based clouds, or even model based clouds. I'm thinking maybe I could use a similar effect to what I'm using for these trees, but have sort of soft particle edges to them or something for the clouds, as well as sort of like a high cloud layer and stuff. But anyway, I'm thinking about all of that. I probably won't touch that for a while now. I just wanted to have something where I could actually now have some weather coming in and let it affect the gameplay, which is really the focus for the next few months. Okay, so now back to these random people who are walking around and generally eating all our food and causing trouble. I thought that basically the main problem that I was facing as far as gameplay was concerned was that you could start a game with 2 male Sapiens, and actually that's new up in the top right there too, where it says Lily is pregnant. It's sort of a notification system I've been working on. But there was a problem where you'd never be able to grow your tribe because you've got no female Sapiens. There's no way you can have children, and they're just, if you had a couple of guys that just grow old and die, and that would be the end of your game. So the way that I thought I would combat that, the main sort of thing would be to have other people from other tribes sort of coming in and walking past and interacting with you, and the ability to kind of allow them to join your tribe. So that's where I'm heading now. I've just made it so that it'll spawn basically like mini tribes out in the fringes of where your people are. It's basically sort of this story event kind of driven system, so I should be able to allow that, what I've created should be able to be used for things like, disease and other events that I haven't really kind of thought too much about yet. But yeah, just lots of sort of events to kind of make the game more interesting. And yeah, the only event at the moment is that will spawn up these guys, and they'll come in and sort of head towards either your sort of center. They'll head towards campfires at the moment. I'll probably make them have different kind of desires and different kind of traits. So some of them will be kind of aggressive, some of them will be wanting to join your tribe, some of them will be really hungry and just steal your food, and then you'll be able to click on them, and at the moment it's sort of showing you all this sort of UI as though they belong to you, which is obviously incorrect, but you'll be able to actually select how you want to interact with them. So say whether you want to be hostile or whether you want to be welcoming, or whether you want to try to recruit them into your tribe. So yeah, I think that's going to work really well, and I've made a good start on that, and I'm quite excited about carrying on with that. And yeah, that's where I will be heading in the next sort of few days. And okay, so I'm going to leave it there for today. We'll see how I end up going with these nomads and what interesting behaviors they end up having in the next video. Until then, please remember to wishlist Sapiens on Steam, and we'll catch you again next time.